Your actions are already telling the truth. The only question is, are you ready to listen? Because most entrepreneurs believe success comes from strategy, marketing, and sales tactics. But what if your words and actions don't align? It doesn't matter what you do. And I found some alarming statistics around this one. 92% of small business owners say they've experienced mental exhaustion that impacted their business growth from a Zero report. And I found a UC Berkeley study that says 60% of entrepreneurs suffer from some level of anxiety or depression due to misalignment between their values and their business. And studies show that entrepreneurs who operate in alignment, meaning that their words and actions match, are 3 times more likely to sustain long-term success. So welcome back to the Mind of George Show. It's the show for entrepreneurs who know, just like today's topic, that scaling their business isn't just about strategies and tactics. It's about breaking free from outdated business models, marketing tactics, and mindset limitations. Also, you can grow and scale with ease and impact. We do that by mastering our mindset, refining our customer journey, and creating marketing that truly connects with who we are and our audience. And I had to record this podcast because I spent an entire day in reflection, and I'm diving into a hard truth that will either make or break your business. And it's a truth that I ignored and most people still ignore to this day. And so after reflecting, I realized that the biggest bottleneck in business isn't a lack of knowledge or effort. It's misalignment at the deepest level. And when your words and actions don't match, your business constantly feels like an uphill battle. But when you bring them into alignment, everything shifts. And so in today's episode, I break down the 4 golden handcuffs that silently trap entrepreneurs, why success without alignment will leave you feeling empty, how to spot the gaps between what you say and what you actually do, a really simple audit that you can do instantaneously that will reveal where you're out of integrity, and the fastest way to unlock true freedom by bringing it back into integrity. So if you've ever felt like you're grinding effortlessly but still feel stuck and you're driving up this uphill battle, this episode will show you why and how to fix it for good. So let's get into the show. Welcome back, family. And if you're watching this episode, it is dark out, but after a day of snowboarding and deep reflection, and then an afternoon of incredible connection calls, there was something that hit my heart today that I just had to share. But before we even dive in, I want you to just take a pause for a minute, whether you're driving, whether you're sitting down, wherever you are right now. And I want you to kind of reflect on your past week. I want you to think about the past week of yours. Look at your calendar. Look at where you spent your time. Look at the meetings that you had. Look at the content that you created. Look at everything just from this perspective lens. And I want you to now, in that frame, as you're thinking about that, I want you to think about what you say to yourself or what you say out loud to others that you say matters the most to you in your business and life. And then I want you to ask yourself one simple question. Do they match? Because I had an incredible friend on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he said a quote that absolutely landed for me at a deep level and put 15 to 20 years of my entrepreneurial journey into an instant perspective. And he said, when you will no longer listen to somebody's words, their behaviors will always tell the truth. And as easy as it is to say and apply that to so many people outside of us, the first place that I went into was myself. And what we're going to talk about today is alignment at the deepest level, because it came up on 3 calls today. Someone who has a net worth of money that I can't even imagine or fathom, under 30 years old, but also at the deepest level feels out of alignment and realizes all the pursuit and the chasing wasn't giving fulfillment. And it reminds me so deeply of back when I was a food blogger, and people interview me about this and they think I was crazy, but I built this giant, successful 7-figure company, this food blog, like almost 1 million social media followers combined. And I'll never forget the day where I was sitting there staring at everything that I'd had, but I felt 100% empty. Like the empty, where as an entrepreneur, you just want to say, I want to burn it all down, or I want to go hide in a hole, or I don't want anybody to know that I exist. And from the outside, like from the outside looking in, I was being celebrated. I had the quote unquote perfect business. I had the revenue, I had speaking gigs, I had dream clients, like I had everything. And I also weighed 260 pounds and I looked like I was dead on the inside. Because every single time I felt about giving a talk or going on a podcast or making a new recipe, it didn't even feel like resistance. It felt like super glue that was preventing me to do it. And that disconnect, I knew something was off, but I didn't really know what to do. And for me, it all came to a head. And I think I've shared this publicly before. When there was so much opportunity, but I was coming up with reasons to not do it, excuses to not follow through. And I basically, for a year, drove that business into the ground so that I didn't have to come back into alignment, but it would force me to. And it almost cost me everything except right by the skin of my teeth, I was able to bring it together, have a perspective shift, and actually in ultimate reality, choose to walk away from that business. But when it comes to alignment, I think that that's the worst case scenario. And I think it matters in decisions as far as how we post on social, how we show up every day, to who we do business with and how we do it, in how we have our actions and our behaviors and our habits. And I think the thing that I see so often, especially with a lot of my clients, is that we wait until we become a prisoner of it, and then it feels almost impossible to change. And luckily for me, I had a couple of catalytic moments that shifted it for me. But that gap between those two lists in your calendar and where you actually spend your time is what we're teaching and talking about today. And truthfully, probably more than anything, sharing from the heart. But I've shared this conversation with a few people today and it resonated deeply, and it's been coming up in the last week. And so I just wanted to say that we're going to talk about it because the most beautiful thing about alignment is that it's never complete. There's never a finish line. And I say we because myself included. I'm working on this too, and I'm going to be working on this for the rest of my life. And I realized what happened back then and what still continues to happen, but in smaller versions, is I got so good at fooling myself. The more successful I became, the better I got at lying to myself. And at one point, to some degree, for external success, it was a skill that got me here. But I promise you, it's also the skill that was going to keep me stuck forever and genuinely sacrifice my soul in the process. And I think why I fell into it is like, I have a business. I'm an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur. We build our businesses and we get our results by enrolling other people to trust our vision. But I never thought about the fact that I became an expert at convincing myself to trust the distorted reality in my brain. And it was really, really strategic and sophisticated. And I drank my own Kool-Aid for a long time. I would say things like, I'm just being strategic, when in actuality, I was going against my values. Or, oh, I'll never forget this one. This is what scaling requires. But yet there was a version of me 8 to 10 years ago where I was just looking out, and anything that I saw working, I was willing to try. And I was just blindly mimicking other people, or I'll do it differently when I hit that next revenue target or when I get that next client. But every single time I did, the line kept moving. Or my favorite one is, all my friends do it this way. Every successful person I know does it this way, which is like the deepest level of like the biggest lies that I told myself, to the point where even people would challenge me on it that were close to me. And I'd be like, no, look, they do it. Look, it's working for them. But here's where it gets really interesting and a little bit scary. And I'm going to use handcuffs for this one. Thanks for Coach Karen for coming on the podcast and talking about the gilded cage. I'm in this zone of cages now. But where it got really, really scary was quote unquote success became these golden handcuffs. And they were attached to my ankles and they were attached to my hands. Was it comfortable? 1,000%. And it was still a cage. And it was preventing me. And I see this happen all so often, but I love my clients and I don't get to share their stories with them. But it was the prevention of the next level of my life. It was the prevention of the next evolution, the next chapter, mind you. And so I figured out that it basically was broken down into 4 golden handcuffs. And these are the handcuffs that I have found have kept me stuck every single time I've been up against this. And also the handcuffs that I see in so many other people's businesses. So let's take the first pair of golden handcuffs. We'll call them the money handcuffs. You're making good money. You're making good revenue, maybe even great money. And that became the reason to stay misaligned or to keep checking the box, right? I'll tell people how I really feel, or I'll do that marketing concept that I want, or I will email them my way, or I'll run my calls my way once I hit 6 figures or once I get my next 5 clients. But that number keeps moving. Or the second one, it's like the validation handcuffs. Every time we hear somebody say, you're crushing it, or way to hit your goals, or our social media numbers go up because we copied something, but it didn't really feel right. Or I even remember, and I think I would still do this, but I wore a bacon suit for a sales video. Yeah, now that I think about it, I would still do this. But there was a time where I went from not flying and not traveling and being with my son as much as I could to 130 flights a year, because it worked a few times to do intensives in person and go to keynotes and go to these events. And so the more and more I did it, the deeper I fell into that trap, because I was getting the validation, but I was losing everything that truly, truly mattered to me, which was time with my son that I'm not going to get back. And so the more and more I did it, the more that voice inside of me that said, like, this doesn't feel right. This isn't you. This isn't what you said you wanted, got quieter and quieter. And then third is really the blueprint handcuff, right? It's this version of success. We have the team or the office or our friend circle or the commitments or the responsibilities or all these external circumstances, and changing any of it feels, and the internal people pleaser in me feels like I'm letting everybody down. And then the fourth one, oh yeah, there comes the emotions. The fourth one is the most dangerous one of them all, which is fear of losing everything that you've built. Oh man. And what I learned the hard way is that I was losing something way more valuable, and I lost something way more valuable a couple of times, which was myself, which we would call alignment. It was my values. It was what I truly stood for. It was how I truly felt. And I believed all of those handcuffs. I believed every single one of them. The money was flowing in and people like, yeah, you're doing great and you crushed that talk and we'd love to have you at the office and we'd love for you to come to this event. And I would brag about the businesses that I owned and how many more I was working on and how many clients I'd had. And that truthfully last set of handcuffs, the fear of losing it all at the beginning of this podcast, is the one that I was the most afraid of. But because I waited so long and because I pushed so hard and I drowned that inner voice with so much noise, it ended up costing me both.
It cost me that business that could have been driven by a team, or I went back into alignment or hired a couple people to help me. And instead it was driven down to like losing multiple 5 figures a month and nothing coming to fruition. And I got to give it away. But in that process, I also lost myself. And all these golden handcuff success metrics were the ones that were lying to me. And the bigger the numbers got, the more followers I had, the more success, the more validation. Truthfully, the bigger the lies I told myself were. And the reason I started today's podcast with that quote is because I was saying a lot of words. I was justifying with a lot of words. But if you looked at my actions were telling the truth. My revenue was growing, but my soul was shrinking in the process. And you can't put that on a spreadsheet. And luckily, I'm not a spreadsheet guy. But I could feel it every single day. My email list was bigger. My social media followers were up. I had people that would come to events, and yet I wouldn't go live. I wouldn't send the email. I wouldn't reach out and make an offer. I wouldn't get on sales calls. I wouldn't collab on, like, I can probably think of the 30 to 40 projects that I passed up that I'd probably be retired from this point. It just didn't work. And it never works. And the easiest way that I can describe it, as a former Marine and spending 13 years of my life as a Marine, is there was a world war happening inside of me, like World War III. And based on what I know and my friends and people that I now love coaching and help getting into the deepest levels of alignment, we all have it. It's this consistent and constant inner battle between who we are, but then all the noise of those handcuffs trying to convince us of who they want us to be. And when I had to look at it hard in the mirror, the market was winning, not me. The noise was winning, not me. And then think about how much we're surrounded by it. Every single time you open Instagram. And I have to own this too. I'm guilty of what I'm about to say right now. Someone's telling you the right way to do it. Here's exactly how you do business. Here's exactly how you scale a company. 7-figure CEOs do this. 6-figure CEOs do this. This framework's the only way to do this. This is the way that you have to do it. Successful entrepreneurs never ever do that. And your gut is screaming, this isn't me. This doesn't feel right. And yet we take notes, or we mimic, or we copy. You'll be in rooms and events and coaching groups and masterminds, and you'll see everybody using the same strategy or tactic, or the same funnel, or everybody does launches this way. And slowly, and sometimes quickly, without even realizing it, your whole identity morphs into those things, into those processes. And there's nothing wrong with them. Let me be really, really clear. There's nothing wrong with them. But we sacrifice who we are. We ignore that gut. And we're like, who am I to question what's working? Well, if they do it, I'll do it. And it feels like you're just selling your soul. And our body keeps the score. For me personally, what that looked like was being a guy who was running a health company and a paleo cookbook and recipes and teaching people how to love their bodies and take care of themselves. And what was the one thing I wasn't doing? I was addicted to opiates because of my past that I wouldn't look at. I was 100 pounds overweight. I literally couldn't walk up the stairs without being out of breath. I barely slept. And that's the physical stuff that you could see. The headaches and the sleepless nights and the panic attacks, the pit in my stomach before calls or meetings. All of them were these giant markers of my car or check engine lights screaming like, George, pay attention. George, listen. George, something in life isn't adding up right now. And that's where all of this pain comes from. And it's hard when I talk about alignment, because it's such an easy word to just like take in or out of, like, oh, it's alignment. It's a woo-woo word. But really, at the deepest level, it's that the words that I say match the actions I take, and that both are aligned with what's important to me. And for you listening, that both are aligned with the actions that you take and the words that you speak to who you are and how you want to do business. And like, my favorite thing now is that I have one client in mind and I love her to pieces. And she hired me because every single person had told her, every single one had told her, you have to do it my way. You have to use my system. This is the only way to do it. This is the only way to build it. And because of these lessons, I was like, no, what's your way? What feels the best? Let's design your way, and then let's take what I know and make it yours. Let's take customer journey. Let's take strategies and tactics, but let's make them feel like a heck yes to you, not a heck no. Because if you are repulsed by your business or the way that you do business, you're never going to be able to succeed in it. And we went through all of this, and now, like, she's skyrocketing, and it's the most beautiful, beautiful thing ever. But it really comes down with the fact that even if you go back in time, all these things that we copy and all the way things that we do, somebody started them and they did it their way. Or there's other people who can look at a strategy and tactic that's working, but realize, like, it feels off and iffy. So I'm going to take what works, but I'm going to add what of mine. I'm going to add my identity to it. I'm going to add my beliefs to it. I'm going to make it feel like a heck yes. And they do it. And then it ends up working. Or think about the clients or the people that you know, or the systems that you've been in part of, or the programs that you've joined, where their marketing is all around, like, deep transformation requires real connection. But then behind the scenes, everyone's trying to turn it into an automated machine with AI. And I'm going to automate every touch point. I'm going to automate every touch point. I'm going to automate every touch point. And every interaction turns into this, like, scalable process. I've helped numerous people with that as well. But in some of those instances, what we find is that it's the building of the system or processes that bring them more joy than it is building the relationships. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then when you find your superpower, you can shift from being a coach in that bucket to, in this specific example, being a coach and teaching other people how to build these systems and build these processes for their businesses. And for me, this one's going to sting a little bit. Yeah, this one's going to sting a little bit. At the deepest level, the place of alignment that I struggle with the most, maybe struggle is not the word, that I'm working on actively, and I think it will be a forever working on. But in my business, the one thing that I love more than anything is coaching clients and helping people build and scale a business that's in alignment. I love giving talks. I love getting on calls. I love doing podcasts. I love answering questions. But I catch myself occasionally slipping into guru mode, where in the moment, what's more important is giving answers instead of empowering people or asking questions or helping them find their own answers. And my best friend TJ, who was on the podcast, if you haven't listened to that episode, I highly recommend, said this best. And he said, what I know as a coach is that my ideas will never be as good as the ideas of my clients. They know better than I do. And why do I fall into that trap sometimes? Because it's faster and I can get to everybody more, or worse, because it looks more impressive and it's what people expect. And it's a hard line sometimes. It's one that I constantly work on, and I feel like I'll be working on for the rest of my life, but I love it. But instead of getting frustrated, instead of just spitting out those answers, I just am intentional about it. So what do? I ground myself before calls. And when somebody asks a question, and I do this still, I do it with my son, I do it with my partner, I do it with my friends. Before I give a quick answer, I literally count to 2 in my head, and I take a really, really deep breath and I pause. And I will, in that moment, ask myself, am I serving my ego or am I serving my client right now? It's going to cost me, quote unquote, the chance to look smart, but it's earning me something so much more valuable. And that's who I want to be. And that might not be you, but that for me is really, really important. That for me is where I've had the most profound breakthroughs. Like, I love my coaches. I love my mentors because they never give me the answers. They always give me questions that help me find them. And then when I find them, I take action on them. And the reason I say this, and I'm so open about this, is because I think, as Joe Smaro said, who gave us that quote at the beginning of this podcast, he said this on our show as well. He said, I think that the challenge that people have is that they look at these things like alignment or wellness or success, and they think there's a finish line. But in actuality, it should all be redefined as an active pursuit of it and consistently checking that garden and saying, am what I doing serving myself or serving my clients? Am I operating in alignment? Am I being in integrity? And this is exactly how I break this down for people. And so I'm going to look at my notes in front of me so I can nail this for you. But here's where I want you to shift this. Here's where I want you to try this. Here's where I want you to focus on this, because we can all acknowledge, and I don't think any of us are immune to this. I know on the 4 calls that I had today after snowboarding, this same conversation came up in each and every one of them with a different flavor. But what I want you to do is, for the next couple of days, pick 3 days, 5 days, 7 days. I want you to become a curious detective in your life and in your business, because this applies to both. I want you to look for the gap between your words and your actions. And I promise you that if you do this as a curious detective, it's powerful. If you do this with guilt or shame or fault or blame, it might get a little uncomfy. But there's no wrong in any of this. None of it. The truth is that in order to shift it, you first have to find it. And finding it is the part that I avoided for so long. Now I do it as much as possible, sometimes 20 times a day, if I'm being completely honest with you. And I ask for feedback all the time. And I've kind of fallen in love with the process. But what it really allows us to do is to reflect it away, to operate in alignment. Do we want to post it like that? Do we want to say that in a video just because somebody said to say it? Am I taking that client because I'm afraid of something? Or am I sacrificing my values in that client because I'm afraid of what they'll say about me? Am I doing that part of the business because somebody else told me that I should do it? Am I keeping this person in the company or this person as a client because I feel bad instead of honoring myself? Like, there's so many situations that this applies to. And it's not about, and I'm going to be really, really direct about this, it is not about burning it all down. It is not about throwing it all out. It is not about having horrible knee-jerk reactions and then causing damage. It's about being intentional and also celebrating the things that got us here, even the things that got us to this conversation, because at some degree they helped us. And they're just a path that we walked to shift our perspective. But we get to celebrate them, but we get to audit them and say, which ones do we keep that are serving me in alignment at the deepest level? Which ones should we trash because they're not working anymore? Okay. So I've done this before on social and it worked really, really well. But I want you to pick a time of days, right? And I'm going to use 3 days as the example. This is where I have my notes pulled up in 2 places to make sure that I nail this for you. Okay. On day 1, I want you to audit your entire business, your marketing materials, your website, your social media. And I want you to physically, with a pen and paper, write down every promise, every declaration, every "this is what I stand for" statement. So for me, those stand for statements are like, I believe in people over transactions, relationships beat algorithms. There's no right way to do business. It's your way. Like the things that you say over and over and over again. And don't judge any of them. just list them. Just have a running list. That's day one. It's just this beautiful documentation. So consider yourself a biographer of all your own stuff. And on day two, I want you to attempt and succeed, but attempt to get and track every single business decision that you make. Every client interaction, every team meeting, every piece of content you create, every DM you send, every post you write, every podcast you record. But only the things that you're actually doing, not what you're planning to do. So all of the things that you took action on, that's day two. And on day three, I want you to put those lists side by side. And I want you to write them out on paper. That would be my goal. There's something powerful about pen to paper. And I want you to look for the incongruencies, inconsistencies, or as we all know in 2025, we can just call red flags. But I also want you to look at these and pay attention to those red flags. I want you to pay attention to the feelings that you get when you check your calendar, or the Sunday afternoon dreads because Monday's coming, or the tasks that you keep rescheduling over and over, or the messages that you dread responding to or don't respond at all, or the platforms that you don't open while continuing to tell yourself you're going to open them, or the list that you keep making and then you move it from one sticky note to another sticky note to another sticky note. None of those are random. None of those are random. For a lack of better terms, we can call it your integrity compass. They're basically the symptoms of misalignment. And when you compare these lists and you find those moments, like I said, it's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You're going to choose one area. This is my invitation for you. Choose one area, just one, where there is a gap between your words and your actions that are costing you the most. Just one. And in costing you the most, it could be that you're not sleeping because you're dreading making content, or a client or somebody that you're pursuing to close as a client, but it's almost like you're becoming their version of yourself to get the deal, instead of taking that same energy to go find the right client that matches you. Whatever that area is, just one, the one that's costing you the most. That's the area you start with. And then you write down your true desire in that area. Not what you think you should want, not what your coach says, not what your partner says, not what the industry says, not what the market says, not even what I've said. And I apologize publicly for being the guy that still accidentally says, like, this is the only way, or you should do it this way. And it slips, and I'll correct it, and I'll keep correcting it. But actually what you want, what is your true desire in that area? So tangibly, I have a client right now that I can think of that I love this, that I picked something up from that landed deeply when it came to serving clients. I'd never thought about having my standing calls rotate weeks. So I had a week of calls and a week of deep work, and then as needed calls in between. And I heard this and I was like, wow. And with some of my clients, they love it. And with others, they're like, no, we'll do it this way. And I'm like, amazing. But I heard that and I'm like, I actually would desire that. Or you might think of an area where you want to make your content different, where you want to record at 7:00 at night instead of during the day. And I was like, no, you can't. But if it supports you, that's the ultimate goal here. And so the goal is to pick one area, just one. And once you pick that area that's a red flag or out of check with the barometer, on the other side, you write down what it is that you truly desire. And the goal is not a mad brake check. It's not a 180. It's a continual step-by-step process to bring that things into alignment without causing pain or further pain. If you realize that you're better off planning your content instead of making it every single day. I have clients on both sides of the coin. Some of them thrive on making social media content every day and they get results. Other of them do it a month in advance and do it once at the beginning of the month and then have a majority of it done. and they both are equally successful. At the deepest level, you have to feel excited about your business. Doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean you're not going to have resistance. Doesn't mean there's not going to be roadblocks. But when you're in alignment, it becomes the thing that you get excited about pursuing instead of becoming the thing that we continually procrastinate and push off and avoid doing. And so I wanted to share this today because number one, that quote really, really resonated with me. And it was this giant mirror for me. And number two is this is a conversation that's been coming up a lot lately. And I don't know if it's the world. I don't know if it's 2025. I don't know where it's coming from. But I feel like there's this giant call to authenticity and alignment at the deepest level. And at your core, your level of alignment and authenticity is a direct indicator of the amount of success that you're going to be able to create. And I'll own this publicly, I've even hid behind my own marketing. I've hidden behind customer journey. I've hidden behind marketing. I've hidden behind scaling because there's times I'm afraid to talk about mindset. There's times I'm afraid to talk about personal development. And there's a whole season of my life where I hid it because it wasn't the quote unquote popular thing to talk about. Or years that I leaned only into email marketing because it was the thing that was working. And even this podcast right now is me practicing this in bringing mindset to the surface and personal development to the surface because you're worth it and I'm worth it. And every level of life, every level of business does require a different level of us. Like we weren't born knowing how to drive. We weren't born knowing how to be entrepreneurs. We weren't born knowing how to manage teams of 10, 20, 40, 60, 80 people. And those things aren't skills. They're also identities that we have to embody and things that we have to grow into. And so even this podcast is me flexing this muscle, and I'll own this. I'm uncomfortable right now. I'm sweating, hoping that this resonates. And there's a part of me inside where I'm like, I hope they like this. I hope this is going to land for them. And then there's also a part of me of like, well, let them, because I love you. But this has been on my heart. And this is a lot of what I do behind the scenes in coaching people is we work on strategies and tactics, but we also work on the beliefs and the identities and alignment at the deepest level, because that's where success truly comes from. And nobody can bring your life and nobody can bring your business into alignment but you. And the first step is starting with an awareness of what it is that I say is important to me, but how I'm actually spending my energy and time, because that's what shows us what's really important to us. What we say doesn't matter, what we do does. And when we can find the discrepancies in that list, we can start bringing them together to be in alignment at the deepest level. And so I'll just leave you with this as a final reminder. Your actions are already telling the truth. Your actions are already telling the truth. The only question is, are you ready to listen to them and to bring them into alignment? And this is an exercise that you don't do once. You can, but this is an exercise that becomes a part of your day, a part of your life. As those golden handcuffs, the 4 of them, are going to continue to be there. And at every level, at every win, at every loss, they get clasps back on and we have to take them off. I know personally for me, I've fallen in love with this process. I've never been happier in my life. I've never been more aligned in my life. Every single client feels like a family member. I have the best relationship with my son. I spend my time playing with him. I don't work on Fridays except because he's out right now, which is why I'm recording this. We spend the weekends together playing. I'm not in the family's important to me, but I'm checking my phone, or I'm making dinner, but yet I'm going to be responding to Slacks at the same time. No, I'm going to make dinner. I'm going to sit down and eat, and I'll get up a little earlier tomorrow to hit those Slacks and to hit those messages so that I can be in integrity in both buckets. And so this is an invitation. And I would encourage you to share this, not the episode, share the results. A partner that you love, a business partner that you love, a colleague, somebody that you share with, that you network with, anywhere where you can be excited about this and share, but also have accountability and support in the process. I would invite you to, share it online and all of that. That's my style. And I've realized that not everybody operates like I do. Another thing. So instead of telling you the prescription, I'm just going to invite you or submit to you that it might be a good idea. And if you want, you are more than welcome. If you want to grab 15 minutes of coffee with me, you want to shoot me a DM on Instagram. My Instagram is It's George Bryant. I would love to jam with you. I would love to jam with you. And I want to be clear. This isn't woo-woo. This isn't something that like everybody should avoid talking. I feel like this should be the normal conversation. And this doesn't replace strategies and tactics. This is the foundation that makes them work. Customer journey still applies. Marketing still applies. Messaging still applies. But this is the foundation of it all that makes them all successful. This is the alignment that allows them to work your way. And for you to have a business that you love and a life that you love, it has to be your way. And you have to be willing to repaint the walls, redecorate, and sometimes renovate in order for it to feel like your house. And I hope that this is the episode that stops you from doing it the way that I did, which was demolish the whole building, even though it was built perfectly, to then have to rebuild the same one and realized all I had to do is repaint, redecorate, or renovate. And so I love you to pieces. I hope God blesses you on so many deeply profound levels, and that you have the most beautiful, beautiful of days. I will either see you in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs. That's it. Bye.